And one thing over the years that I've done vital signs, it's been really easy for me to get kids to collect data, to go out in the field and collect data. That's been great. But what hasn't been easy is to do anything with those numbers. And last year we were in a situation where we collected maple syrup. We went out and collected sap every single day for a month. We had a lot of numbers. And I could have just left it there, but knew, looking at the math standards and looking at the next gen science standards, that I really ought to do more with data analysis with them. So we got a bunch of information from the state about maple sap production, and the kids, we worked through these raw numbers, and it was painful and it was slow. And it took me a long time to figure it out. We didn't get as deep as I wanted to get. And so then this summer, I kind of learned about a new website. So I wanted to share that with you all in case you get to a point where you've got kids collecting data. If you're the math teacher, or even if you're not the math teacher, you want them to do some real work around mean, median, and mode, and what's the best representation of data. This website turns out to make things a lot easier. So I shared with you all, I think a week and a half or 2 weeks ago, a link to a document that Maggie Harvey, who works for GMRI, had made to a website called Tuva. So the link that I sent you was a document that had a link to this. So this is a data set that exists on this website that Maggie from GMRI put on there, or someone from GMRI put on there. And it's where they took all of this information from the Vital Signs website, all the found and not found information for an invasive purple loosestrife, and they dumped it onto the website. It's already there. After I did this, I actually figured out yesterday how to put my own data on there, but this one already existed. So I gave this to my kids. I'm trying to move this so I can see around your faces here off to the side. So the kids looked at this. They had no idea. They hadn't really done anything with loosestrife, but we were just learning how to use the website. And we went through the steps that were on the worksheet that really laid it out and made it simple so the kids and I could go through and figure it out. But these are all of the data points dumped in from a spreadsheet. You can see down here the raw numbers, the town that it was from, latitude, longitude, all the information that you have kids put on the Vital Signs website got dumped into here. But then the great thing is you can have kids think really about attributes and characteristics and what goes on the x-axis and the y-axis. So you can do something like take biodiversity, which is diversity of species. So you could take the diversity of species and drop it down on the x-axis, and it's going to reassemble this. And so now the kids, rather than having the kids plot all of this information themselves, you can take a look at the diversity of species, the different counts. So these are just raw counts. And if you hover over it, it gives you an idea. Well, there were 231 cases where 4 different species were found. Then you can look at something like under stats, you can add, I want to know what the mean, median, and mode of this data is. So then the kids can see, well, the average of the diversity of species here was 7, but the mode was 4. So we had a couple of group discussions where before we chose the mean, median, and mode, we just talked about what the best representation of the data was, like how would you summarize? They always want to go to average, but then after they looked at what the average actually was, they started to get this idea that outliers exist, right? We get these over here that skew things. So we got to have a conversation about that. And my kids still sometimes struggle with mean, median, and mode, even my 8th graders do. So seeing like this was interesting. And then we can take other attributes like this one, where we could say, let's look at this data when purple loosestrife was found or not found. So let's see if we can answer a question about the biodiversity, whether or not purple loosestrife has anything to do with biodiversity. So if loosestrife is there, does that change biodiversity? So we could start looking and answering those questions. And so it puts it in a view that's really simple. And then it walks kids, the worksheet that GMRI put out as a scaffold to use, walks kids step by step through that. Once they got a few steps in, then they immediately start, more than me, clicking on everything to figure it out themselves. They didn't really need the step-by-step as much as I needed the step-by-step to really walk through and see, okay, this is how I changed the title. or this is how I might print the information. It took me forever to figure out how I might print the information. And the kids finally said, Mrs. Tate, go up to this little button up here that says more options, and then there's a camera, and then you can save it. And they found it all within moments, right? But I was overwhelmed by it and wasn't going to share it with them. They weren't overwhelmed at all. And then they can ask other questions of that. So that was a great tutorial. And then I thought, okay, but that's great. That's purple loose stripe. That doesn't have anything to do with what I'm doing in my classroom. So I want to know what it would be like if I tried to dump the maple syrup information in there, this huge spreadsheet. And so I tried, it wasn't working. I asked Molly for help. GMRIs, they're great. They will answer your questions. Molly couldn't get it to work. So of course she went to the source, which was Tuva. And they got right back to us within probably 3 hours. And I sent him the guy from Tuva's, the raw information, and he immediately looked at it and said, oh, you have too many, your spreadsheet's too fancy, basically. You have too many tables, you need to simplify it. And he simplified it for me and sent it back to me. So I was able to dump that information on, so that's over here, which was not a ton of information. But we worked so hard last year to try to figure out which of these attributes were impacting the maple syrup run. And kids, it was days and days of kids graphing. And we could do this literally in 2 or 3 minutes with this website. And they can ask really great questions and get their answers backed up and look at it in lots of different ways. So that's like just a really quick little rundown of using Tuva to do data analysis, because that was the next piece in my teaching that was weak. And I definitely needed something to help me look at these big, big numbers. So if kids are asking really huge questions, like they're asking really huge questions about what's driving climate change, and we have kids who are really skeptical if we give them statistics ourselves, right? Now I have kids coming in who want to see the raw numbers, as they should. Then we can actually take huge data sets and play with them now in a pretty simple way. So this has worked really well for me. I know there are a couple of other sites out there. I think Plotly is another one that people have been using, but this one has really started to work for me.